In November 2010, a stray dog wandered into the marketplace of a Bangkok temple with a white plastic bag in its mouth. It drew attention. Devotees noticed the smell, and when they saw what was inside, they called the police. Officers traced the bag back to a mortuary on the temple grounds. When they opened the door, marked with the number 17, they found plastic bags piled up from floor to ceiling, 348 of them, overflowing from the containers inside. Each one contained the remains of a human fetus. Days later, investigators went back into that same mortuary and found more than 1,500 additional bags. By the time they'd counted them all, the total stood at 2,002. The remains of over 2,000 fetuses had been stored inside a temple mortuary in the middle of Bangkok. The questions came immediately. How long had this been happening? Who had been bringing them there? And why had no one stopped it? This is the case of Wat Phai Ngern. Wat Phai Ngern sits in the Bang Ko Lam district of Bangkok, a busy, dense neighborhood crowded with shops, schools, and the ordinary noise of urban life. The name means silver bamboo temple, and to people who lived nearby, it was simply part of the landscape, a place of quiet reflection, of prayer, of routine. Lottery vendors lined the path to the entrance. The smell of incense drifted out from the main hall. Monks went about their days. At the edge of the temple grounds sat a mortuary building, a low, functional structure where bodies awaiting cremation were stored before the furnaces took them. This was not unusual. Thai Buddhist temples often serve a dual role as places of worship and venues for death rites. Communities rely on temple mortuaries, and for generations, the system had worked quietly and without incident. But for much of 2010, something was wrong at Wat Phai Ngern's mortuary. The people who worked near it had begun to notice a smell, not a faint, solemn smell of incense and wood, but something heavier. It came through when the door was cracked open, drifting toward the workers who rested nearby. One of those workers was a 68-year-old man named Supot Liangbamrong. He had been building pagodas at the temple for decades and knew the grounds intimately, and he knew that the smell coming from that mortuary was not right. One day, he decided to take a look. Supot never spoke publicly about any of this in 2010. It would be 14 years before he told a journalist what he saw. Plastic bags, many of them crammed into the mortuary storage containers. Some had burst. Swollen, rotten fetal remains had spilled out. He knew immediately what they were. What he didn't know was who had put them there. That was until he saw a temple worker carrying more bags inside and adding them to the containers. He said nothing. He didn't want the worker to lose his job, and he didn't want to tarnish the temple's name. And so he held on to that knowledge quietly and went back to work. But on November 16th, the existence of these remains became public knowledge. When the police arrived, they sealed the area but began questioning temple workers. Within hours, 2 undertakers who worked at the mortuary were brought in for questioning. Both men, Sutep Chabangbon and Suchard Pumi, began to talk, and what they said sent investigators back inside to open the remaining compartments. And by Friday, November 19th, 2010, the 2002 count was complete. The bags had been stored inside containers normally used to hold human remains awaiting cremation, tucked among the ordinary dead of Bangkok. The police colonel leading the investigation, Sombat Milintachinda, was direct with journalists. The undertakers, he said, had told investigators they had been paid to make the remains disappear, and that they had no idea how many fetuses they had accumulated. They had a system in place. You see, a temple like Wat Phai Ngern doesn't just cremate the remains of family members. Periodically, it performs a mass cremation of the unclaimed and the anonymous, a rite sometimes called the washing of the cemetery. According to what the undertakers told police, that was the plan for the fetuses all along. The bags were meant to be slipped into the next mass cremation, burned among all the nameless bodies. Except the system fell apart after the crematorium furnace broke down. Repairs had taken time, and so the bags had piled up with no way for the undertakers to get rid of them. It explained why the fetal remains were found at the temple, but it didn't explain where they came from. To understand that, you need to understand what Thailand looked like in 2010 when it came to abortion. Abortion in Thailand was, at that time, almost entirely illegal. The law permitted it under 3 conditions only: if the pregnancy was the result of rape or incest, if continuing the pregnancy would endanger the woman's physical health, or if the fetus had a severe abnormality. Even in cases that technically met these conditions, it was difficult to find a licensed medical practitioner willing to perform that procedure. The stigma was profound. More than 95% of Thais identified as Buddhist, and conservative Buddhist doctrine considered abortion to be a serious moral transgression. A sin not just for the woman, but for any medical professional involved. The laws, of course, did not end abortions. It drove them underground. Estimates at the time suggested that up to 400,000 women in Thailand underwent abortions every year. The overwhelming majority of those procedures were illegal, and though most were performed by medical professionals willing to skirt the law, around a third were performed by unqualified practitioners. And that didn't come without cost. For every 100,000 abortions, an estimated 300 women died. For safe abortions conducted by qualified medical professionals, the mortality rate is less than 1 per 100,000 procedures. But despite these risks, there were those willing to perform the procedure regardless of qualifications. And those performing illegal abortions needed a way to dispose of fetal remains without attracting attention. In Bangkok, one woman found that Wat Phai Ngern had undertakers willing and able to assist. Investigators traced the operation back to that woman, a 33-year-old named Lanchakorn Jantamanas. Police described her as a former nursing assistant, someone who had learned the basics of the procedure by watching a licensed practitioner perform abortions at a clinic where she had once worked. When that doctor moved on, Lanchakorn set up her own operation. She was running an illegal abortion clinic from a cramped building in Bangkok. She had taken on clients herself, most of them, according to reporting at the time, were teenagers and university students. Women whose partners had abandoned them, women who had nowhere else to go. She charged approximately 5,000 Thai baht, which is roughly $170 for procedures on women up to 3 months pregnant. For later stage pregnancies, the price climbed to 30,000 Thai baht, close to $1,000. Wealthier women could fly to Hong Kong or Singapore, where abortion was legal. Lanchakorn's clients could not. And so Lanchakorn capitalized on that opportunity. But that was not her only source of income. According to police, Lanchakorn had been collecting fetal remains not just from her own clinic, but from a broader network, reportedly as many as 20 illegal abortion clinics operating across Bangkok. For each set of remains she collected and transported to the temple for disposal, the clinics paid her approximately 500 Thai baht, worth roughly $17 per fetus. And she had been doing this, she told investigators, for years. The police raided 3 clinics in the Thonburi neighborhood of Bangkok. They arrested Lanchakorn and began the formal charging process. In the days that followed, they uncovered more than 100,000 counterfeit pills manufactured to induce miscarriages. The scale of what was hidden beneath the city was becoming visible. But there was more to come. Lanchakorn claimed that a number of babies had survived the abortions she performed. She recounted one case in particular. A woman had come to her 8 months pregnant. Lanchakorn performed the abortion, and when she was reaching for a black bag to dispose of the baby's body, suddenly it moved and cried. Frozen, she phoned a doctor for advice. Cut the cord, he told her. Clean him and watch him for 24 hours. Lanchakorn did as she was told, and the boy lived. She decided the ones who survived were simply too stubborn to die, and she raised them as her own. By her own account, there were 8 of them. When pressed about her decisions, she said, "I sin every day, so if the children don't die, there is no need to kill them." I should leave a caution here because the police questioned this account. These claims come from Lanchakorn herself, and when investigators examined the children's birth certificates, they found irregularities that made the paperwork look manufactured. Whether these children are truly the result of failed abortions performed by Lanchakorn is not publicly known. News of the case naturally caught the attention of waves of reporters, and naturally, they looked to the temple for answers. A spokesman for the temple insisted that the administration had been completely unaware of what had been happening in the mortuary. Whether the temple bore any institutional responsibility, whether anyone in a position of authority had noticed and said nothing, was, according to available reporting, never fully resolved in a court of law. Despite denying responsibility, the temple did decide to hold a ceremony for the 2002 fetuses. It was held on November 27th, 2010, and thousands came, government officials among them. Monks chanted to mourn the unborn and send merit to them. Each fetus was given a name, written on a slip of paper, and the names were placed in a coffin and carried 3 times around the crematorium in an old ritual of circumambulation. At the mortuary door, mourners left offerings, small cartons of milk, fruit, and toys, the kind of things you bring for children. The ceremony may have brought some closure, but the fetuses couldn't actually be cremated. Not yet. From the moment of discovery, the police had held the remains back as evidence for DNA testing and forensic examination. They wanted to determine gestational ages, causes of death, and, if possible, the parents. Those findings were never fully released. Whether a single one of the 2002 was ever matched to a parent, a clinic, or a name is, as far as the public record shows, unknown. It is one of many questions about Wat Phai Ngern that the investigation never publicly answered. The investigation did, however, lead to sentences being handed down in 2011. Lanchakorn was convicted of running an unlicensed clinic, practicing medicine without a license, and performing abortions. The court gave her 10 years, then halved it to 5 when she pleaded guilty. Suchart, the undertaker who had taken in the bulk of the remains, was charged with destroying and concealing evidence of a crime. For each of the 2002 fetuses found at the temple, he was given 4 months, resulting in a total sentence of 8,008 months. That is over 667 years. Following his guilty plea, this was halved to 4,004 months. However, Thai law caps punishment for offenses like these, and so he was ultimately given the maximum penalty allowed, which is 20 years. Sutep, the other undertaker, fought his case rather than confess. He was convicted on a far narrower count, destruction and concealment of just 15 of the fetuses. He was handed a sentence of 3 years and 4 months. The conviction may have drawn a line under the case, but it still raised a national question, and Prime Minister Abhisit Wijajiwa was asked directly, did the abortion law need to change? He claimed the case was a reflection of how severe the problem had become. And yet, he rejected the calls for reform, saying the existing law was flexible enough. The government's answer to the problem was a crackdown on illegal clinics, not a change in the law. The crackdown also had a clear effect on the industry. Within days, police reported that abortion providers were abandoning clinics and moving procedures into women's homes. They moved out of sight, became harder to trace, and were more dangerous than before. This is the paradox that Thai society spent the next decade trying to work through. The law had not prevented the abortions of 2002. It had created the conditions for the entire situation. It had made an ordinary medical procedure so stigmatized and so difficult to access through legitimate channels that some women had been pushed to seek treatment at shady illegal clinics. Another interesting fact here is that in the years after the scandal, the temple that had stored the 2002 fetuses began offering something to the public. Kumantong, small child spirit effigies, revered in Thai folk belief as guardians that bring luck and protection to those who care for them. So the temple advertised a series of these figurines for adoption. They were said to house the wandering spirits of the very fetuses found in its mortuary. Well, think about that for a moment. The dead had come in as a commodity, collected from clinics, paid for one by one, disposed of in the dark, and then they went back out as one, named, blessed, and offered to the living as a token of good fortune. Today, Wat Phai Ngern is still open. The mortuary is still there, but the vault doors are locked now. There is little visible reminder of what happened inside in 2010. But in the years since, the temple has appeared regularly on lists of Thailand's most haunted places. Some visitors claim to hear cries from behind the locked doors, giggles sometimes. Supot Liang Bamrong, who still works at the temple decades later, dismisses these stories when asked. It was during an interview that he paused as he walked away and turned back. Perhaps, he said, you should also make an offering to the babies so you can tell their story. The fetuses of Wat Phai Ngern did not have names when they arrived at the temple. They arrived in plastic bags, paid for by the piece, to be quietly disposed of. On November 27, 2010, they were given names, written on paper, carried in a coffin, and mourned by thousands of strangers. But the women who came to Lanchakorn's building in Thonburi, the teenagers, the students, the ones whose partners had left, none of them have names in public record. Maybe they prefer it that way. But it means that their experiences and emotions have not been given the same space. These women are referred collectively as statistics, not as people. More than a decade after the fetuses were discovered, Thailand finally changed the law. The 3 narrow exceptions are gone. Early abortion is legal now and safe, and no longer something a woman has to climb a back staircase to find. The conditions that fill these mortuary compartments are no longer in place. But it came too late for the women who once had nowhere to go but a cramped building staffed by a former nurse's assistant. That is all for today. Thank you for watching.